Okay, folks, just admit it. You now like this song because of this show. He's the king of kings. Kenny C, hey, what's going on? Back in the seat of co-host tonight. He looks like he's frozen, but I don't think he is. I can't tell. Anyway, guys, I think this is the show. If you're watching this in the future, this is the show that pushed us over 500 subscribers. True story. We're almost there right now. So, hey, if you like this content, give us a thumbs up, hit the bell and share the video. And we just appreciate it when you subscribe. Anyway, yeah, I was wrong. Kenny C was not faking it. He was frozen, but he'll be back in a minute, guys. So that gives me time to do the announcements coming up very soon. In less than a month, we're going to be down in Louisville, Kentucky, advanced spiritual warfare training, Vicky Joy and I. And there is a promo code. So Tom20, you can save $20. Come on out to Louisville. It's going to be a good time. I was just there a few weeks ago. Super cool church. It was built, the sanctuary was built on the second floor. And when there was a flood at the Ohio River, kind of interesting that I've been at the Ohio River several times in different parts in the last couple months. But anyway, when the Ohio River flooded, it was the only church in the area. Hey, he's back.
I'm back.
That had services because the sanctuary was on the second floor. Anyway, there you go. Mike Spalding, Derek and Sharon Gilbert, David Heavener. Okay. Sanda's going to be there, Vicky Joy and myself and some other people. I was chatting too much and I forgot to run up and get my glasses. So I hope there's not a lot of reading today. I'm going to ask my producer to blow up. I'm going to blow up the picture really big. But hey, Kenny C, also, before we bring our guest on, I want to mention to the listeners out there, thank you for supporting us by buying the Ezekiel 8 apparel. We just sent out a big order today. Little things like that help us out, so we appreciate it. You can go to throughtheblack.com and you can see our apparel on there. We have a shirt that says, I will fight for you. And the gates of hell shall not prevail. So you guys can go over there and check it out. We got resist hoodies and all of that junk over there. We still have some movies left. And I do have a second pair of glasses.
Yeah,
I do. But they're both upstairs. So good idea, James. I think the answer is I need 3 pair of glasses. So that's what's going to help me. Anyway, guys, yes, lots of stuff coming up. RealDarkNews.com. That's our news website. There's an amazing archive of stories over there about the paranormal, about satanic ritual abuse, occult crimes, all that stuff. So just letting you know, I want to say, hey, to all the new subscribers, to all the new friends. The truth is, folks, on a weekly basis, we are making new friends. People are saying, hey, I'm new to this show and I like it. That's cool. I don't know why. I don't have a self-esteem problem, but I'm just like, we're trying to figure out where's our friends at, where's our audience, and we are slowly finding them. And it's you guys when you share that helps us do that. So Kenny C, tonight is going to be a stellar night. We really miss our friend Vicky Joy. Okay,
oh, absolutely.
Co-host of this show. She's been sick, but she is going to return, and the plan is she's going to return tomorrow. Okay. Yay. So, awesome. Anyway, she's going to be back, and she's just needed some extra rest and need to catch up, but she's going to be all right. And I think I can speak for her when I say thank you for the prayers. She appreciates it. But anyway, Kenny C.
Yeah.
Without any further ado, you and I have a very special friend on, and I'll be honest with you, I was boasting a little bit because I like when people tell me like, yeah, hey man, I know Judd Burton. That's cool. Yeah, Judd Burton is a cool guy to know. But you know what? I spent a few days with Judd Burton down on the Mexico border, and he took me out for steak. And I could tell you a few other things, but we had a good time. We had some Whataburger, we had some IHOP. That's all. I'm not gonna boast anymore. Okay, I don't want to enter into sin there. But hey, let's go ahead and bring him on because we've got some stuff to talk about. Hey,
Yeah.
praise God, brother. You have had a heck of a few months, man, and we're just glad to see you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man,
So,
I'm happy to be here.
the truth is I had a text typed out to you yesterday, and I deleted it because I didn't want to bother you because I didn't know where you were in your healing journey, okay, in your process. And I was like, I'm not going to bother him. And then the phone rings today, and guess who it is? Hey, Studley Judley, my friend, okay, from down in Texas. The professor is calling, and I said, hey, do you want to come on the show tonight? He said yes, and the rest is going to be history. So, hey, just real quick, we're going to have you do this again, but please plug your school and let everybody know why they're going to find out after they watch this show why they need to get involved. But you've been doing your school for a while. We talked about it last night. But tell everybody what you're doing with that, Judd.
Well, this school is it's one of the functions of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, and basically, there's the old website. I'm in the process of streamlining, getting that site not only streamlined, but the new learning platform, online learning platform, is also going to be through the site. And I should give a shout out to Chris Price, who's helping me do all this. He's basically the first official IBA intern. And he's got a lot of really great ideas to streamline stuff. And so that's kind of the delivery system that we're going to be working through right now to be a lot easier for students. And my health struggles this year aside, it's going to be a lot easier for people to just boom and access all kinds of content, not just the text that you'll be reading, but all kinds of lectures and interviews and things like that I've done. It's gonna be really cool. And I should also give a shout out to Tori Peterson, because she and Chris are putting together a Blurry Creatures fan discussion group, and that's going to be a regular broadcast, from what I understand. Yeah, there you go. Let's plug Blurry Creatures. We love Nate and Luke. We love those guys. And yeah, man, it's basically the way that I've described it in the past is that the content is, and indeed the entire intent of these courses is the tone is very much sort of like Sunday school meets the X-Files. That was sort of the driving force behind the whole thing, because people weren't getting this peripheral, what's considered peripheral, but is really turns out to be central, just in terms of spiritual warfare and related subjects. Most people are not getting this from Sunday school and Bible studies, and so I felt called to devote all of my energies to the Institute, and as of a couple of years ago, that's what I've been doing.
No, well, that's amazing, and I know Kenny C has taken a course. Can you give an endorsement here, Kenny?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I took vampirology with Dr. Judd last year, and it was an amazing class. Matter of fact, I've shared my paper with a lot of people that were like, "This is fascinating." They're like, "How are you taking a class in vampirology that's based in biblical stuff?" And I was like, "You just have to come do it." It's amazing because the content that Judd gives you is some really older manuscripts and books, 1800s, really neat stuff to read. And then you have access to Judd. He'll you write basically a little paper each week about what you studied on, and then he kind of critiques your stuff. And luckily my stuff was so good I didn't have to hear it. He just told me it was awesome. and I was really blessed.
I described it as the academic equivalent of a Nuno Bettencourt string skipping solo.
That's when I knew we were bonded, man. That's it. Speaking
Yep.
of which, today is Nuno Bettencourt's birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday to Nuno. Absolutely.
Happy birthday, Nuno.
Nuno, hey, it's Nuno's birthday today, and if you know, you know. We should play the Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee as the outro.
Awesome.
But hey, we will probably get a copyright strike for it, so we'll just say, "Hey, happy birthday, Nuno." So, guys, yeah. Well, this week, basically, inspired by our trip this weekend, Kenny, we decided to talk about cryptids. We were talking about the Mothman last night, and I basically just threw a dart at a dartboard and said, "Okay, let's do something different." And I picked the Jersey Devil. Okay, it's a cryptid. It's a folklore. There's a story behind it, and I remember when I was a kid in Memphis, Tennessee. I didn't live in Memphis, Tennessee, but I was visiting family in Memphis, Tennessee, and they lived in an apartment complex. And we were kids outside building a fort outside this apartment complex. And we were telling scary stories, inside this fort during the daytime, even with all the neighborhood kids. And somebody brought in a book about the Jersey Devil, or it was a book about all this stuff, and that had a chapter about the Jersey Devil in it. And whoa, dude, we were scared reading this story and reading about it back then when we were kids. I'm guessing maybe I was about 10 years old. And then somebody in the woods across the street there, like when the ground was soft, they put a fake Bigfoot print in the ground and it hardened.
Oh, man.
And I'm telling you what, because we heard rumors that it was there. And then we finally got the guts up to go across the street and go into the woods to see, guys, it was there. It was big. It was a big foot. I'm telling you what, like somebody had made this thing up and it was in the dirt there.
Dude, I guarantee you that book was a scholastic book that they sold at the book fairs at school, because I remember having a book that was just on Bigfoot and cryptids, had the Loch Ness Monster and Yeti and Bigfoot and the Jersey Devil, all these things, man. And they were geared toward 10-year-olds, man. I mean, I think that's one of the things that got me interested. I probably still have a book at home.
Yeah, Kenny, I actually read a book on ESP when I was about that age, and it came from one of those scholastic book fairs. Wow. And I knew everything about ESP from, just all the stuff from telekinesis to precognition to, all the things. Wow. And I was interested in it at a very young age as well because of those books. But so that was my introduction to the Jersey Devil. And I remember hearing stories about how they saw this this cloven hoof, in the snow, and it went like right over top of a house. And I'm like, whoa, that's so crazy. Yeah. Man, I'm reading a story in a book as if I'm seeing it with my own eyes, right? Like, oh my goodness, there was a hoof print that went right over the house. Yeah. That's so crazy and scary. Anyway, fast forward to last week when I'm coming up with ideas for the show this week. And I'm like, the Jersey Devil. So I do the research and then I find the story. Do you guys know the story, like the folklore behind it?
Yeah, I generally do.
Okay, yeah. Well, jump into it then, Judd.
Well, the Jersey Devil is a little bit outside of my regional wheelhouse, but from what I understand of it, its appearance is kind of an aggregate. It's got sort of bat-like wings and it's bipedal. It's got a horse's head and hooves. The kind of the bottom legs of some sort of big quadruped like a horse. And from what I understand, the legend sort of goes back to the 18th century, the early 18th century, with the Leeds family. And there was supposed to have been a 13th child that was born. And Mrs. Leeds was considered to be a witch by many of her contemporaries and neighbors and things like that. And the story goes that she made some sort of Faustian deal with the devil, and that he was the father, and the product of this union was something that became the Jersey Devil. And this legacy continued to be associated with the Leeds family well into the 19th century, as I understand it. But other than the anecdotal accounts that I've read about it, and there was even an X-Files episode that was not actually about the Jersey Devil, but it was called the Jersey Devil. But that's about the extent of my familiarity with the sort of general folklore behind the Jersey Devil. I think it's it's more of a, if I'm not mistaken, it's more of like a southern New Jersey, mid to southern New Jersey thing where the Pine Barrens are.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And yeah, the Pine Barrens, that's where there's a large area of New Jersey. I think of New Jersey as, a lot of city and a lot of coast, but there's apparently a forest out there. And we know there's variations on this tale, and it gets retold and things like that. And one of the stories that I heard was that Mrs. Leeds, because her husband was not very much of a family man, and this was her 13th child, she said, let it be a devil. Okay.
Yeah.
And because she was tired of having, kids, and she was just, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And one of the legends or the stories is that the baby was born, and then it grew immediately, to this ginormous size, and flew away, and it ravaged the midwives and things like that, and then flew out, and it's been on the loose ever since for a couple hundred years now. And they've several times they put out a bounty for this thing. Like if anybody can catch this thing, and I think as recently as the 1990s was the last one. So that where I think it was like $10,000 if you can catch the Jersey Devil.
Right.
Kenny, what do you know?
Go ahead, Kenny. I'm sorry.
No, I just said most of what you were talking about, the backstory and stuff. I've also heard variations that she was actually she was a witch, and that she actually, the devil actually fathered that child. That was a variation story I've heard on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've often wondered, because I think supposedly the child was born in 1735, if I'm not mistaken, but that's not, we're still talking about the era of Cotton Mather, who, if people are students of church history, particularly New England church history, they'll be familiar with Cotton Mather. But Cotton Mather wrote a number of tracts, and one book in particular called The Wonders of the Invisible World, about all of the witchcraft that was associated with New England, focusing in on a lot of the people that had been involved in the Salem witch trials. But I've often wondered, since he was
I don't know the answer to this one, but
he was a bit of a collector of oddities of that time. I've often wondered if he ever wrote any. I've never come across anything, but it just, it makes me wonder if he was familiar with the Leeds family.
Judd, well, folks, in a moment we are going to have a guest come on, a listener of the show, and give their testimony of an encounter with the Jersey Devil. Okay, but I want to ask you something, Judd. We have this perception that that things are getting darker, right? We see Satanism taking over culture. It used to be just heavy metal, but now it's just becoming more and more prevalent. It's into pop music. We see groups like the Satanic Temple just becoming more and more fashionable. And we have this idea that Satanism is on the rise and devil worship is on the rise. But if truth be told, in history, there's been, it's never went away.
Yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's never not been, whether you're talking about the remaining embers of paganism in that sort of transitional period of the 4th and 5th century, when the public classic paganism is dying out and the church is up and coming, or you're actually talking about dedicated Luciferians. That's never been something that's been altogether absent in human history. It's just that they have been historically clandestine about it, so that it and I'm quite positive that that's by design, because that's how the enemy works. But if you take that into not the most recent era, but let's just say the modern era in general, as of the 18th century, just consider how many of these groups, notably the Bavarian Illuminati, who were involved in these large scale wars that made all these banking families that were also associated with the occult, richer than Croesus. I'm thinking, namely, about the Jacobins in the French Revolution. These guys were all Bavarian Illuminists that fomented the French Revolution, and no less a personage than George Washington wrote a letter naming the Jacobins and the Illuminati in 1798. Together, because he had to thwart their influence as they came under or as they came over under the auspices of the French ambassador at the time, a guy named Ambassador Genet. So he had been he in this letter he writes back to this minister. He basically tells him, I have no doubt that both the Jacobins and the Illuminati who have been infiltrating and corrupting our government since the beginning. And this is in 1798. But I say all that just to say that they become less and less clandestine in the modern era, until you're at the point where we are now, where you've had postmodernism completely erode objective truth in the popular consciousness, so that they've got no reason to be as clandestine as they had been at one time. But you're right, Tom. It's never been absent from human history.
So I want to ask you something real quick, and I'm going to ask Bobby if she can hear me, to kind of jump in backstage, and we're going to bring her on here in a minute. So when I hear people, say postmodernism, or the postmodern era or whatever, I'm not a historian, but I understand this recent history and I understand the idea behind it. But sometimes I feel like it's a scapegoat. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, they're just postmodern. Right. They're just postmodern. Right. But dude, that's not postmodern. That's demonic. That's influenced by the other side. You know what I'm saying?
That's just the latest version of it. That's really just the latest version of it.
Okay. Well, no. And I think we're trying to get to make sure we have a picture and audio here from Bobby, but we have, here we go. And guys, I want you guys to say hi to Bobby. We have a listener coming to the show here. I'm just going to bring her in. Hey, Bobby, how you doing?
Hello, how you guys doing tonight?
Good. Hey, Bobby.
Okay. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Well, when Bobby saw the title for the show tonight, she reached out to me and said, hey, I've got a story about this that you might want to hear. And she briefly told it to me. So I thought, hey, why not just bring her on and let her tell the story instead of me telling her story? And it starts off with your mom, right?
Yeah. I'm in Wyoming now, but I grew up in South Jersey, right dab in the center of South Jersey. And yeah, it is. South Jersey is totally different from all the cities up north. It's a lot of farms, a lot of forests. And it's right in the Pine Barrens. My parents grew up in a town called Hamilton, which is where Wharton State Forest is, in that area. And there's a place called Batstow Village, which is, you have all the legends going around that whole area. And the Pine Barrens kind of wrap around down towards the shore. We live very close to them. So we heard a lot of the legends and rumors and people seeing eyes and hearing things and footprints and such. My mom, when I was a teenager, told me a story of when she was a teen. She said, they heard all the legends and everything. So her and a bunch of their friends jumped in a car and went and parked out into the forest in the Pine Barrens to see if any of the things they heard were true. So they were all sitting there, laughing, giggling, thinking they're not going to hear anything. They'd be quiet and listen, and nothing was happening. She said then all of a sudden, it felt like something jumped on the back of the car, something very heavy, and the whole back of the car like shook down. She said they all screamed and looked at each other. The guy who was driving stepped on the gas and they got out of there. So, me being a teenager hearing this and being the teenager that I was, decided to do the same thing with my friends. Now, this is like almost 20 years later. So we went out at night and, found a little path back into the forest and sat there. And it was me and my brother and my boyfriend at the time and my neighbor, who was my boyfriend's cousin. So my brother and my neighbor was driving. My brother was in the front. Me and my boyfriend were sitting in the back seat. And he had this big old, we called it the SS tuna boat. It was one of those big old cars that kind of floated when you went down the road. So we're back and we're sitting there. And we're all sitting there kind of quiet. And every now and again, we'd say something. And then, you whisper and you scare each other. And so we're sitting there and we would think that we thought we saw eyes. You know how you think you see something? Then we're sitting there and the back of the car kind of like rocks a little bit. We're teenagers. My neighbor and my brother, they're like, what are you guys doing back there? And we just kind of looked at each other because we're like, we're sitting here perfectly still. What was that? And the back of the car shook a little bit again. And then it was the same thing that happened to my mom, where it felt like something huge just jumped onto the back of the car. The whole thing shook. The back end was down like something heavy was on it. And we were like, same thing. We were like, let's get out of here. So he stepped on the gas and we got out of there. The thing that I found strange was it was the same exact thing that happened to my mom almost 20 years ago. The same exact situation. Now, I know we probably weren't in the same spot she was in. The stories that I heard, I never heard another person's story just the same. So it always intrigued me that my situation was the same as my mother's situation. I don't know. They say,
well, no, and I think that's interesting. So let me just because I know that there are people out there, haters and skeptics and everything. So let me kind of jump to, like a skeptical question at first. It's like, are you sure that maybe your boyfriend's cousin didn't pay somebody to come out and drop a log, something on the car or something to scare you guys? Or
no, because we decided last time. We said it was my neighbor. My boyfriend was his cousin. We would always just hang out and just kind of like spur of the moment go, hey, let's do this. And it was 25-minute drive. So it wasn't like somebody else could have just knew where we were. We just turned down this road we found. So nobody else.
Interesting. And Bobby, did you have like afterwards, was there like any trauma or nightmares or anything about this?
No, I've experienced so many things throughout my life. I could tell you guys saga stories, from what I used to call devil dreams, even from when I was as little as 4. So no, to me, this was just, something that happened, you know. I heard stories. It wasn't talked about a lot. People that live there tend to think it was more of a legend, you know. It was more of a funny thing, something you tell around the campfire at night, that kind of stuff. I don't know how many people, like in my generation, actually thought it was true or real. They would just use it as a spooky scenario, you know.
Well, and I want to give you guys a chance to ask Bobby a question, but it kind of reminds me of some of the stories around my area. Now, I live in Ohio, so we didn't have the Jersey Devil here, but we had a thing called the Crybaby Bridge, where if you go to the bridge, turn your lights out, and put your car in neutral, the word is that your car will roll across the bridge. Okay. And, you know, I've heard so many stories about people, you know, talking about that. Then you hear the cries, okay? Because I forget what the story was. A bunch of teenagers rode off the bridge at one point. I don't know if there's any truth to it or not, okay? But we heard those stories. So what do you guys think about what Bobby said?
Me personally, man, I mean, to me, it seems very valid. It sounds like I've heard other stories like that. Matter of fact, it sounds similar to what we watched as a reenactment on the Mothman thing last night with the car situation out in the woods, dropping in on stuff. It seems like that's a pretty common story, more than you think, and especially the fact that Bobby and her mom both have it, and it makes you wonder if there's any kind of kind of connection that these things can know.
You know, they say these demonic beings can smell your blood. Yeah. So I'm wondering if they actually sense the DNA in my body that was my mother's.
Yeah, very, very possible.
Interesting.
Really cool, but
you know, the thing that's tracking with me, Bobby, is I've not just heard those kinds of anecdotes about the Jersey Devil, but down here in Texas, we have, and you'll find it all over the country, really, stories about the Goat Man, and I've talked on a number of occasions about that. This sort of satyr pan-looking creature. He is the legend that I heard, you know, that we would try and explore in a Goonie sort of fashion when we were kids was that this thing would, you know, there was a road south of where I live, south here in Merkel, called Devil's Backbone. And there's a creek that runs at the base of it. And one of the stories was, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, is that if you drove out there, if, you know, this thing would jump on top of your car and not only jump, but repeatedly jump. And there were some stories that said that it carried an axe or some sort of melee weapon and would tear the roof of your car open and drag you out. Now, there's another creature in this region that I personally think is probably reports of the same creature. It's a Sasquatch type creature that has been variously called the Holly Him, after a town up the road from here named Holly. And the Merkel sightings were called the Merkel monster sightings. Same sort of thing. In fact, one of my best friends in the world told me a story very similar to what you're relating, Bobby, about, except he actually saw this thing. Yeah. You know, same thing on the back of I think it was in a truck, actually. Same thing. He could feel the shocks and the chassis and the whole body, you know, go down, like something had just been thrown into the bed of the truck. And he turned around and he saw the silhouette of this thing. Gas, he just put on the gas and got out of there. But I hear these kinds of stories, and, you know, you guys have just returned from the Mothman festival. You guys really need to talk to Joe Taylor about his Crosbyton sightings here in the Texas Panhandle. Same kind of scenario. Car stalls out, or some sort of car trouble on one of these highways in the middle of nowhere, and this thing lands on the car, shakes it, and then flies off and moves out in front of the car, you know, several, probably 50 yards, 40 yards down the way. So that the headlights that are still working on the car can see this, you know, people can see this thing. But this is a pattern that I hear repeatedly, and it's one of the reasons that I think that these are demonic manifestations within a folkloric context, because obviously these things don't have your best interest at heart. They're not there to bring you a birthday cake or something.
Yeah.
Hey, you ever thought about the fact that, like, I don't know if you ever seen the movie Jeepers Creepers?
Yes, that's how Joe describes these things.
Yeah, it's very crosses over between the Jersey, even the Mothman. They're very similar stories, and since no one's getting a really good look, I mean, the Jersey Devil even says in some descriptions has the same big red eyes. So these things seem very similar in aspect. Yeah.
What do you guys think that the motive is? Like, why do this? Why jump on somebody's car? Why aren't they doing more? Why aren't they coming out, and doing even more harassment, closer to civilization? What do you guys think?
Well, I'll say a couple of things about it. Demons have historically been associated with the wilderness and the periphery of societies anyway. And that's not just from later hagiographies that we get about people like St. Anthony, but that's actually stuff that's in the Bible. They're pretty clear about the association between, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, as a matter of fact.
Absolutely.
So there's that aspect to it. And of course, these things feed on fear. They cultivate fear, that they seek opportunities to do that. And they know that it's easier to do that in remote locations where people are separated from other people, from what they think is as their comfort zone. So I think that's got to play into it.
Yeah, I think so too.
I also think that we're seeking them out. We're looking for it.
Yeah. That's true.
Well, and just like if it was, and again, people that are, that are regular listeners know I don't believe in ghosts, but people that go ghost hunting, they're going to find something. Okay. People that go Bigfoot hunting, they're going to find something, because these things love to perform for humans and bring a distraction. So, hey, anything else you want to add, Bobby, before we let you go?
No, I don't think so. That area, though, I will say in South Jersey, there is a lot of witchcraft, a lot of if you go exploring around in all these places, like there's like grain silos and stuff that go down into the ground, cement buildings, you'll find all kind, like Tom, you talked about the sigils before. That stuff is all over down there, and it's common. So I think that just adds to a lot of the activity in the area. So
no
absolutely.
doubt, it seems to go hand in hand. So wow. Well, hey, Bobby, thank you so much for reaching out to me tonight and coming on and telling that story. That was super cool.
Great.
So,
thank you, Bobby.
It just worked out great. So hey, we'll see you later, and let us know if you have any more stories. We're going to be covering more stuff. So anyway, thank you so much. Wow.
That was cool.
When we're talking about, cryptids and Bigfoots and things like this, and we see, these kind of encounters, fear, we know, plays into this. And just one of the things that I started noticing, and I'm going to bring this up again this weekend when I talk to Pastor Sean. We're going to be doing a show about Bigfoot, in a few days. But I started noticing some similarities between places where satanic rituals took place and places where Bigfoot sightings took place. Okay. And I was, I had a list where I was cross-referencing these things, and I checked, I don't know how many boxes. I was like, wow, all these things check out. So I think it's kind of interesting. And I'm glad she said that, because I was actually going to ask her if there was any kind of occult activity or witchcraft in that area. Judd, from your point of view, how big is the occult practices, the rituals and stuff? Is there a connection between these types of things, the sightings?
I think so. Because the ritualistic element in all manner of witchcraft, but most especially expressed in those that are devoted, without any sort of cover to directly to the devil. In other words, satanic witchcraft or Luciferian witchcraft. But any sort of occultism is going to be a draw for these entities. And witchcraft, in a lot of these cases, seems to be the glue that really holds together the supernatural end of these folkloric demonic manifestations. And I'll tell you what I mean by that is that we'll take were creatures, werewolves, for example. You're hard pressed to find any accounts that aren't tied to witchcraft, and I'm not just talking about werewolves in the Germanic or Western European tradition. I'm talking about were creatures all over the world. You spin the globe over here to the American Southwest, you're going to run into the same kinds of things, like with the Manitou and the Wendigo and the Skinwalkers. They're all sort of variations on the theme, but there is always some sort of ritual that's involved in the sort of transformation necessary for that individual to take on these aspects, or for that demon to manifest in that form. I think about all the hallucinogenic concoctions that are associated with shape-shifting in the Southwest, that they make from things like datura and peyote. There's always some sort of witchcraft element to it. That the same thing with vampirism. Even though in a lot of stories, they seem to be these mindless revenants, but in some traditions, like the very ancient ones that you find in the ancient Near East, and in fact, indeed even the prehistoric Near East, there is this association between occultism and the transformation into a vampire or some sort of vampiric chimera. The same thing is true of zombies in the sort of traditional sense, not the postmodern pop culture, viral zombies, but I'm thinking about the Afro-Caribbean traditions of the zombie. That's very much a part of that kind of transition. And again, there's a laundry list of these kinds of creatures that are tied to a transformation that is catalyzed by witchcraft.
So, how much do you think pop culture plays into some of these? I don't know if I want to call them just like legends or fads, when the films came out, however many years ago, the vampire books, the Twilight, it created an interest in them. And then, we've seen other things. There was a big interest in zombies. I think we had the best zombie movies back in the 70s, but
I agree. There's George Romero.
Yeah, George Romero. In the last 10 years, The Walking Dead has created a lot of interest, and people really believe, like normal people, are preparing for a zombie apocalypse because they're watching media, or playing video games or something. So, I mean, do you think this plays into, belief in werewolves, or maybe belief in werewolves, will generate, the interest of a demonic presence saying, oh, these guys want to believe in werewolves. I'll give them something to believe in. You know what I'm saying? I mean, do you think that scenario is legit?
Yeah, I do. I mean, let's face it, these sorts of creatures in pop culture now, it's just PR for the demonic. People are just getting primed left and right. And it was a very subtle transition in both cinema and literature, I think, because now these things are seen as heroes or anti-heroes of a sort, and you see good and traditional and wholesome things, and the real heroes sort of vilified. Whereas, if you go back not even a generation, you still have, classic works like Bram Stoker's Dracula being made, where, faith is a big tool that's used against the vampire and hunt him down and dispatch him. Even with like the Blade movies that Wesley Snipes was in, you had a clear idea of who the bad guys were, who the villains were, and even in more recent, I'm saying like since the 70s, there's this idea with works like Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. It's still very clear that the vampires are the villains in the story. Or even though Anne Rice she really pushed that envelope. The thing that was interesting about her vampires is that even though, and I would call her vampires anti-heroes, not a classical hero in the sense, and I'm not an apologist for Anne Rice vampires. What I'm saying is that even the vampires in her stories, even though they embraced what they thought was elegant and beautiful and good, they knew there was this sort of self-loathing that they all had if they lived long enough. They knew that there was they described themselves as monstrous and non-human. So there were, even in Anne Rice, who pushes the envelope about as far as you can get before actually making the vampire heroes, there's still this sense that the vampire is still villainous, is still something to be dispatched, is still something to be avoided at all costs. But because even in the first book, Louis is saying, that there's a woman there who wants to become a vampire, to be a kind of surrogate mother for the child vampire. And he is doing everything he can to say, you have no idea what you're asking me to do. You have no idea of this thing that you will become. You have no conception under God what you will become. And we don't see that anymore. Now it's completely the opposite. So that they're complete heroes in the Twilight series. They're relatable and stuff like the Vampire Diaries. And take your pick, any sort of folkloric demonic manifestation has found it, the hero's crown, so to speak, in modern pop culture. And that's a dangerous thing. Whereas once we used to decry these things. I've heard some interesting interviews with Christopher Lee, who played Dracula in all the Hammer films. He was asked in a few of these interviews, do you have a problem, being a practicing Catholic and playing this monstrous role? And he said, I play those roles only because I will only do them if Dracula dies at the end.
Wow.
You don't get writers or actors, for the most part, coming out and treating the material like that. It's all being elevated to something that should be lauded now.
Yeah, no kidding. Kenny, jump in there.
Hey, I just wanted to ask if it was true that he had a Lestat tattoo on his back. Is that true?
I'm not sure. That may be apocryphal. I'm not sure, but the man was in a heavy metal band. He did make some heavy metal albums.
That's right. That's exactly right, man.
Yeah, well, so I think all this is fascinating, and this is the type of stuff when we talk about UFOs, when we talk about Bigfoot, and these campfire stories, the things that many of us love to do, that never would anybody dream of bringing this subject up in the pews in church. You know what I'm saying? But there are people that are tormented or haunted, okay, by by these types of things. Okay, I think maybe the most common would be maybe like a ghost or something like that, right? But the church is in a way dropping the ball. The Bible teaches about this. It warns against this. It warns against talking to the dead. It warns, against this, all these things. It says we'll have power over all, anything the enemy brings at us. Okay, and there are people out there that are terrified. And think about this, Judd and Kenny. How many times do we hear stories of children like they saw something, they're frightened, now we understand kids can have a bad dream, okay? But I had experiences when I was a kid that was like, okay, this is not a dream, and I just saw that thing move, okay? And I've told the story. My mom was involved. My mom tried at one point to get involved into tarot card reading, and she was doing it one time in our little apartment, and things were moving around in my room. Okay, and I remember, I had a fear that started then that went into my 30s. Okay, of being in the dark alone, and not until I took Russ's courses was I able to overcome that fear. But the church is kind of dropping the ball in response to this. Judd, what do you think needs to happen?
Well, we need to become better students of the Bible, like our grandparents were. Biblical literacy is just, it's gone in the tank, and this is way before we get into the deeper dive into the languages that the Bible is written in, and how much is really there just hiding in plain sight that we don't get, because we have some quite honestly bad translations in English. And that too, maybe, is probably by design in a lot of cases, because you have a lot of people who are not believers themselves. They're theologians, but they're completely naturalistic or materialistic in their outlook on life, and they whitewash the supernatural right out of a lot of passages. How many times have we seen Isaiah 50 or 34, chapter 34, the passage in there translated as he goats and the screech owl, basically dancing around in the ruins. Well, the words there are very clear in Hebrew. The sherim, which were basically satyrs, and Lilith is designated by name. So we're not talking about escaped herd animals or zoo animals or anything like that. We're talking about demons. And 9 out of 10 translations don't translate that.
Hey, I learned that. I learned that from you in one of your courses. That was one of the most interesting things I'd ever read, was the Lilith situation, the translation.
Oh, that's great. That means a lot to me, Kenny.
Yeah, no, it was. That's when I came across that. It's amazing when you read that. Hey, I always think too, with a lot of stuff, with a lot of the vampire type things, even the demonic stuff, that the Bible's basically telling us we're not to partake of the blood. We're not to eat the blood. We're not to do this stuff. And then, it's glorified in pop culture. And there's people that are, and you think about it. Think about what kind of diseases are carried around in the blood and all these kind of stuff. We're glorifying that in pop culture. And the Bible's telling you right out of the bat. So if people don't have biblical literacy, they're missing that out completely. Oh yeah, it's just whatever. It's no big deal, but it's very blatantly in the Bible. Do not partake of the blood.
Right.
No, yeah.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Hey, somebody in the chat is just inquiring about the courses, and I think this is a good time to kind of plug your school again, Judd. And just to let everybody know, I love what you said. It's X-Files meets Sunday school. But I want to say, hey, our show is kind of like Stranger Things meets Sunday school, maybe. But
yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead and plug your school again real quick.
Yeah, I've got 6 programs. And if people are interested in taking coursework with me, they can email me at professorburton@yahoo.com. Like I said, a lot of this I'm kind of in a transitional period right now, but a lot of this is going to be streamlined and lots more AV content and stuff like that. But the curriculum as it stands now, that won't change, in terms of like, I mean, I'm always going to be adding stuff to this because it's just going to be a snowball, basically. There's just going to be stuff that's added to it. But the programs as they stand now are biblical anthropology, which is kind of the general one. You get a little bit of everything, some biblical history. It's definitely got the supernatural in mind. So you get some demonology and some of the kind of stuff that we're talking about here too. Then I've got biblical demonology, which is devoted entirely to that subject. And I also have, it's kind of the hot button item right now, is the preternatural morphology, which is what Kenny has been studying under. And it's basically looking at these demonic manifestations in folklore. It's kind of the Monsters 101 course in the programs that I offer. But I also have a world mythology program. I also have the ancient Near East and the ancient Mediterranean as well.
What if somebody's starting out? What would you recommend that they would take first?
If they're kind of starting out as a new student of the Bible, I would recommend that they take the biblical anthropology certification, because that kind of, like I say, that has a little bit of everything. You get exposed. There are courses like Old Testament, New Testament survey. There it is. Thanks for the plug, Kenny.
Hey, I'm just telling you, I have all of Judd's books on my Kindle, and you can go through any of them. They're all really good. Interview with the Giant is incredible. I mean, it is. Ethno-historical notes on the Nephilim. I mean, it is fantastic. So any of those books, they're really good to get, and you can get a lot of them. Like I said, I've gotten them in PDF form from Judd and different things.
Sure.
I'm going to add something else, Judd, to what you're talking about. What I think is really amazing is that a lot of the course material Judd has brought from stuff like the sacred text. I don't know if you can see this. It's a little USB drive, but you can. It's on the internet. But what's amazing to me is that it's free, and there's 30,000. There's so many texts. I mean, it's huge. You can't go into it. And what Judd has done is gone through and picked out the best stuff. Now, I bought this because I wanted to make sure that I had it all on a USB drive if the internet goes down. So I have all that to search with, but you can go online. But my favorite part was you could get in there and go down that rabbit hole and never really know what you're talking about. And Judd kind of puts that in perspective and gives you a nice little outline to run through, and you learn very efficiently that way. But the topics are just, it's amazing. I thought the vampirology class was spectacular, and people are always amazed by that they're like, how do you tie that in with the Bible? And I'm like, take the course. That's all you got to do. Take the course. And hey man, I think your prices are really cheap too. I think it's worth it. I think you should be charging a lot more.
Well,
in my opinion.
Well, that prices are going to have to come up somewhat, just by virtue of the new tech, that's going into effect. But I try to keep them reasonably priced, because I know the conditions that our society is going through right now. People have lives, people have jobs. I get all that. But I really appreciate you saying that, Kenny. That's a great archive too. I discovered sacred text when I was working on my dissertation. I thought, where have you been all my life, basically? Because the cache of documents that are there, both primary and secondary sources, is just invaluable. And they've got it nicely partitioned and broken down, and you can search the whole thing. It's really great.
Yeah, and you can go to that. That's just sacredtext.com, right?
Right. There are lots of public domain archives out there, and you're really just a search engine search away from finding a lot of this stuff.
Judd, can you
I was
going to say, One of the most fascinating things when I took one of your classes was the fact that the author of this book, one of the most well-known books on vampires and stuff, that he's tied into biblical stuff. He wrote a hymn. Was there a big hymn that he wrote?
Oh, you're thinking about the werewolf book.
Oh, it's the werewolf book. Okay.
Yeah, it's the yeah. Although Montague Summers, who wrote A Vampire's Kith and Kin.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah, he did write a book on werewolves that's really good, but I still think the definitive work was by and this is the text that I used for the werewolf class, is by Sabine Baringgold. And if people are familiar with
right.
if people are, he was a minister and an ethnologist, and if people are familiar with the hymn "Onward, Christian Soldiers," and most people will be, if you're like me, you've sung that song probably hundreds of times in church. This is the same guy that wrote that hymn, wrote this definitive, authoritative book on werewolves.
Yeah,
so
that's what
this guy, and he articulates this in the book. He knew, because he had his own experience. He knew that there was something demonic and netherworldly about what tied all of these were-creature stories together.
Yeah, I think I started on the werewolf class, and then when you got sick, everything kind of got shut down. I've been waiting to come back to that, because I went ahead and took the time and finished up my Heiser stuff, which was right. At one point last year, I was taking Heiser classes and Burton classes. I was insane because it was like the amount of stuff I was doing working full time. But man, it's great.
Is he a rocker or is he a nerd? You decide.
I'm a rock nerd, man. Yeah, dude, that's it, man. I love it. Rock nerd. I'll take it, man. Good stuff.
Hey, I love it. They're online classes. It's over the internet, right, Judd?
Right. And then they've been basically on kind of a correspondence format, but there's actually going to be a learning management system that I considered a few, because like Moodle and Google Classroom. But I talked to Chris Price, who I talked about earlier. They're launching he and Tori are launching this Blurry Creatures fans community kind of broadcast. And Chris had approached me about it. This was before I got sick. But we reconnected and talked about it today, as a matter of fact. And I was like, so basically you're going to be creating the LMS and it'll be through the website. He's like, yeah. I'm like, that saves me so much effort. I'm not a Yep.
Judd, when you get this up and running, you got to come back on and we'll plug it again, because we want people to get plugged in. I see people in the chat. They're hungry for knowledge, and this is a good place to get it. So I just want to mention,
folks,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I took a straw poll a couple of weeks ago on my Facebook page, and just had this overwhelming response. It was close to 500 people. When I just threw it out there, how many people would be interested in a Judd Burton podcast, and it was overwhelming. So I'm I am going to be venturing into the podcast world very soon.
I'm excited about that. That's great.
Well, hey, I want you guys to plug Blurry Creatures, but I want to mention, just because I saw Russ's name mentioned in the chat, and if anybody is interested in his teaching, his training, you can go to I think the best place right now is to go to our website, which is throughtheblack.com. You can go on there and just click on Russ's picture up at the top. It'll take you to his courses. You can just kind of follow along there. I recommend taking Confronting the Powers first. Yeah, so you click on Russ's page and you can see the courses. You click there, it takes you to another sub page, and there you go. The notes are there, it looks like. So, and then there's all those audios. I'm telling you, you know, you don't have to rush through it, but you know, there's theocentric counseling. I tell people if you take just 5 hours of that course, you'll probably be a better counselor, a better, you know, minister than your pastor at your church. Nothing against your pastor. I don't even know him, but I'm just speaking, you know, in general.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
But guys, wow, what a Judd, I'm so glad to see you, brother. I'm so glad you rung me up today. And this is a pleasant surprise for everybody. We just got to get another update. We're doing our show in seasons now. We're going to do however many weeks. We're going to take a little break and we're coming back. I want to get you back next season. Praise God for your just increased health, and you're doing better. What can you just kind of give us a you know, a prognosis and a goal as far as what's going on with you?
Yeah, well, you know, one of the things that I've been dealing with the last couple of years is I've had some problems with my knee, my right knee, and so a lot of this stems from older injuries. Part of it stems from just the horrible experience that I had in the last facility that I was in. But the big issue is just a mobility issue. But thankfully, I have a wonderful team, a wonderful care team, doctors, nurses. They're all on a mission to get me on board. My physical therapist is amazing. He's taken people who are in this place who are 30 years older than me, came in not being able to walk, and walked out of this place within 3 or 4 months. So I have high hopes, and it turns out we were at Hardin Simmons at the same time. We went to the same undergraduate university, and we probably walked across campus past each other and didn't even know at the time.
Small world.
It is getting smaller, but I would say that my prognosis is good because I've got a good team and I'm highly motivated. And you know, one of my nurses, Felicia, I kid you not, and I told Kenny this earlier today. You're gonna love this, Tom. She knows that I'm a huge Extreme fan, and just on today of all days, Nuno Bettencourt's birthday, she just says, you know, I think I'm going to write him, and I'm going to try and get him to come here as added inspiration. She's just like, I'm going to write it out on company letterhead. You know, it's going to be on a letter. And she's like, I can do this. She's like, you wouldn't believe who I've got to come here. She's like, I had this top rated Elvis impersonator come here for some of the residents. And I was just like, okay, I would be happy with a, you know, a text or a video chat or something, or like Kenny got Jason Beeler, the guitar player for Saigon Kick, to weigh in on one of my threads earlier in the summer. So I was like, you know, that's good medicine, man.
It is, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize, man, how much we bonded on things this last year, man. And last year, I tell people all the time, myself and Judd Burton, I believe we're brothers from another mother. And we actually are the same person. We just took different paths about our teenage years. I went to go be a rock star. He went to be a biblical anthropologist, all this stuff. And then we're all coming back together. Now, I'm going to say this because I think people think I'm joking about this, but I'm going to let it come out of Judd's mouth. Judd Burton, are we going to do a band?
Yeah, we're going to do a band. Absolutely.
We're putting a band together. Hey, we had already planned on doing it at the Blurry Creatures thing at Birthright concert before he got sick. We were already it was already in the works. We were going to get together and play some King's X and some cool stuff and some Blurry songs. So that's going to happen, man. So I'm like praying every day for Judd to keep getting better because we've got music to make too, man.
Hey, absolutely.
For the listeners out there that don't know what we're talking about when we talk about Nuno Bettencourt, we're talking about the band Extreme. You probably know them from their hit from the 90s, More Than Words, okay? But they had a lot of other music besides that song.
That's my least favorite Extreme song.
You know, what's cool about Extreme? I love More Than Words. I've played it at weddings before. The cool thing
I
about
was
it,
at the show. I was at the show they debuted it at in Boston. That's where I was living. I saw
that's
that.
phenomenal. Yeah,
That's
Kenny
crazy.
was right there, man. He was in Boston. He saw all this stuff happening. But one of the things that's really cool about Extreme's music is if you listen to their other stuff, it is so heavily laden with allusions to the Bible. Like if you're a
Mhm.
student of the Bible, you can't miss it.
Hmm.
You
Well,
just can't.
And
And
matter of
I
fact,
really,
if you go back and go on to my page or my YouTube channel, you can see an interview with myself and Judd from last probably January, February,
yeah.
where we talk about the Bible and extreme songs all together in one thing. So it's very cool. Go check it out.
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Gary Cherone, he was also very briefly the lead singer of Van Halen, but
Mhm.
he a very big pro-lifer, challenged Eddie Vedder and matched
Yeah.
Eddie Vedder's donation that he gave to Planned Parenthood to a pro-life group at one point.
Right.
Amazing.
So yeah, very outspoken about life, very outspoken about his faith.
And we
So
can
Yeah.
understand what Gary Cherone sings.
yes,
That's right. Unlike somebody else, is that what you're saying, Kenny?
I like Eddie Vedder too, man.
Yeah, we love you too. We love you, Eddie.
I am
too.
not
We
a
love you.
fan, but that's just me. Just
I'm a
because
bigger
of,
Gary fan.
I'm definitely a bigger Gary fan.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
hey, folks, we're going past time, but I do want to answer one of these questions. I'm going to throw this back out to you, Judd.
Okay.
There's a question here. It says cryptozoology, such creatures. Okay, here we go. Such creatures as from Greek mythology, the Centaur, the Taurus, the Griffin, the Hydra, Cyclops, real stuff from Genesis. They're asking, is this from what happened in Genesis chapter 6, in your
Definitely.
opinion?
Yeah, I think you have both. I think you have both pre-flood and obviously post-flood instances of this. But it's really all the same thing. And once you get into the pertinent related apocryphal material, like Enoch, a lot of people are familiar with the Book of Enoch. You're going to see that explicated in greater detail. These sorts of chimera that came out of the Genesis 6 event. Because the Nephilim weren't just gigantic hominids. There were also, because it says that they sinned against animals and birds and reptiles and things like that. That there were these chimerical products of these unions with animals as well, or whatever the mechanism was for mixing it on a genetic supernatural level. You've clearly got, and some of these, I mean, they're prolific. They show up all over the world. I mean, you can't turn up a mythology that doesn't have these chimerical creatures in them.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. Hey, Kenny C, thank you so much for standing in again, and Judd, so good to have you back, man. And we got to get you back next season just to get another update. And our listeners like talking about cryptids, so that's we got it. We just got to have you back, and we got to do this on a regular basis. So good to see you, my friend. Hey, I understand Katie has something to take us out with. I don't know what's going on, but she said she has something ready. So we're gonna close this thing down now. And guys, we will be back tomorrow night. We got an interview. Don't forget, if you like cryptids, this Saturday, Pastor Sean and I are going to be talking about Bigfoot. So hey,
that's gonna be good.
Come on out and hang with us. Friday night, Audiotopsy again. We're going to be talking about an Alice Cooper song this week. So please come and join us, folks. That's all we got.
Hold on.
Oh, okay.